Welcome to the show. Going to talk a little college baseball here. That is Mitch Light of The Athletic, of course, brought to you by our wonderful friends over at 8th and Roast. If you're in Nashville and you want a cup of coffee, or if you're flying through Nashville's airport, BNA, and you want a cup of coffee, 8th and Roast is the place to do it. The best beans and the best coffee shop in town. So go check that out. Mitch Light, thank you for joining us from The Athletic. How are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well. Hope you guys are doing well, too.
Doing great. Obviously, as national champs, it feels pretty good.
So you're a national champ?
I am.
Okay.
All
right.
He had a big series.
Yeah.
I had as many.
I know Tennessee
I had as many
guys in the lineup.
I had as many hits as Cal Stark for a while there. So here's the question. You've been writing. We're going to talk baseball today, and you've been writing. You've known this sport for a long time. You've covered Vanderbilt for a long time, and now you're kind of covering it on a national level with The Athletic as well as on an SEC level. And I'm just curious. You guys at The Athletic decided, and you can kind of take us through the decision-making process that, like, I know you're a big fan of the game and you're passionate about it. And so you're a perfect person to write about this stuff. But what was the decision-making process with you and The Athletic to actually cover college baseball a little bit more this year? And then what was the response from the readership that, and sort of explain what you guys were doing on the platform?
Very complex decision. I texted or slacked my boss, Jill Thaw, our great managing editor, and said, "Hey, I think I want to write a Sunday night college baseball roundup story." That's a great idea. Okay. That's literally what happened. So
sounds about right.
Yeah, no, a little more detail. So, when I started in the college football team in June of 2020, we had college football staff and we also had a college basketball staff. And we really did not cross over much at all. That's changed literally in the past month. We are now a colleges team, to the point like where I've changed my email, my Slack name. It was senior editor college football. Now it's senior editor college sports. Like Kyle Tucker, CJ Moore, all their college basketball writers, we're now under the same umbrella. We're college sports. That's not why we cover college baseball, but it makes it make more sense. So we never really covered college baseball at all. Joe Rexrode, obviously you guys know well, our Nashville columnists, has written college baseball in the past because Vanderbilt, Tennessee have been good. Brody Miller, our former LSU writer, would write some LSU stuff because of the market there. But we really didn't cover college baseball. We did do some work at the College World Series, mainly because Mitch Sherman, our Nebraska writer, lives in Omaha, and he's been around the College World Series, and Max Olson lives in Lincoln, covers the Big 12, lives in Lincoln. So it made sense. Like if the College World Series were in, Phoenix, we wouldn't be sending someone. We had someone there. But, as you know, Braden, as you refer to, I've always really enjoyed college baseball. So I started to do a little bit more last year. I had a preseason coaches roundtable where I contacted 12 head coaches around the country, did a 3-part series. That got good response. I was like, okay, so maybe there is a market for it there. So did a little bit of coverage last year. I wrote an in-depth story on Wake Forest's rise basically to the #1 team in the country. That was good response from that. So did the forum again this year. And then that's when I decided, hey, you know what? I'd like to write a roundup. I think it'd be well received. We've got a lot of college sports fans who subscribe to us, and that, whether or not you're a passionate baseball fan or you're just like a Mississippi State football fan and who likes to keep track of, the Bulldogs, I thought there'd be a market there. So I started doing that, and the response was great. And you know how I found the response, like that I quote unquote made it? When people started complaining, like, you never talk about Arkansas. They're the #1 team in the country. It's like, we mentioned them 3 weeks in a row and they swept Missouri this week. So I'm sorry I did not have a note on, Arkansas this week. So, so that's basically the genesis of it. And I've been doing a lot more, like, in fact, still doing my quote unquote day job being an editor, but I'm doing a lot more writing. Like this time of year, I've got some stories coming about NFL, MLB draft prospects, some college baseball recruiting stuff, which, is very undercovered. I always find interesting. So basically they gave me the opportunity to write about it. And we're trying to incorporate more of our writers in that as well.
What was the response from coaches on being on the national platform? Because you guys are a capital B big platform.
I was going to mention that earlier, Steve, and outstanding. Like college baseball, and Braden knows this. Braden's talked about this for years, how they get that they need media coverage, even though the sport's grown tenfold since Braden was, working for Sirius 10 years ago at the College World Series. Like Jay Johnston at LSU, very prominent coach. Basically, I interviewed him, and he's just like, I read this last year. I thought it was great. I wanted to do this. So like he understood all of the coaches. Like,
yep.
I don't want to single him out because it might not have been the coach. It might have been the SID not bringing it to him. But I've had one coach say no in 2 years of doing this. And I've reached out to like some prominent guys. And I'll give you a little, just real quick. The story I'm working on right now is sort of like a recruiting origin story on about 10 of the top 2024 MLB draft prospects. Like, where did you first see Hagen Smith? Like, when did you know all that stuff? Because, and cut me off, Braden, if I'm rambling here, because when I did that Wake Forest story last year, remember Rhett Lauder, their great pitcher, I stumbled across a story where they found him because the recruiting coordinator was at a summer event, travel ball event in Georgia. There was a rain delay. This coach wanted to go to Longhorns. He wanted to go to Panera. It was too crowded. He wanted to go to Tropical Smoothie, whatever. It was too crowded. So he goes to Longhorn Steak. He's at the bar eating. As he's leaving, Rhett Lauder's travel coach walks up to him and said, basically, if you don't look at Rhett Lauder, I'm never sending a player your way again. Looked at him again, and they signed him, and he became an All-American. So, like, that's a great story. Like, not to pat myself on the back, after I wrote that, I had 2 different Wake Forest media people who covered the team all year, covered Rhett Lauder, reach out and say, that's a great – we didn't know that story. So I'm like, college baseball is not – recruiting's not covered. So the point being, I'm reaching out to all these schools like, hey, like I'm talking to Scott Forbes at North Carolina later today. The point being, the media relations people, the coaches recognize that while the Athletic isn't known for college baseball, it's a big outlet, and we should be talking to them. So the response has been great.
Yeah, just my anecdote is 2007 was my first World Series at the old Rosenblatt Stadium, and the day of the championship series, Pat Casey comes to our set. We are all of Radio Row. It is me and one other person. We are the entire Radio Row, and Pat Casey does like a 20-minute interview like 2 hours before Game 1 of the World Series final. Like that, what that would never happen in any other sport at all. The SEC, of course, I'm curious about the readership and about the interest, because the SEC has dominated this thing. You got 5 separate schools that have won, 5 different schools that have won 5 straight national championships. So when you see folks reacting and responding to your coverage, is it SEC fans who are still interested in SEC baseball and then also other things around the sport, whether it's recruiting or something happening in another conference or a smaller conference? Is it fans in the Big Ten who don't get enough coverage and then want to read something, and the thing that gets covered the most is the SEC? Like, what's the dynamic of like the people like, I know Arkansas fan probably would read about baseball no matter what, right?
Yeah, it's difficult for me to say because the only thing I can go by is the comments, and the comments in our story. We're still one of the few outlets that still have reader comments. I will say most of them are, thanks for the baseball coverage. We really appreciate it. But as I kind of referred to earlier, there's been more of SEC bias, SEC homer, why you write so much about the SEC. But, when I'm writing a weekly roundup column and there's 7 SEC series every week, there's going to be 4 or 5 that are just monster series. Now, the ACC was very, very good this year. It was top heavy. The top 5-6 teams ended up not being, but we thought were just as good as the top of the SEC. So like there's some great ACC series. But so, I would do my best to, like, I had a little notepad. Like if I had 13 items, I would say, okay, SEC, I'd check them off. Okay, 4 SEC, 3 ACC. I'd be sure to get a Pac-12, 2 Big 12 in there. I really tried to go national on it. But it's funny, I did a 10 things you need to know about the College World Series field for the College World Series, and I kind of take pride in this. I do a lot of research. I don't just do stuff that you can read anywhere. I have a weird mind, like certain things interest me, so I might spend an hour researching stuff. So I was really kind of proud of it. And the first comment was, do you know there's ACC teams in there? And I looked at it and I realized that like 7 of my items were on SEC teams, and I didn't do it on purpose. I just found more interesting things about Kentucky than I did about Virginia. It was like Virginia's just a really good team. There was nothing that I found interesting. It's actually
the entire athletic department at Virginia is like that, actually.
So the point being, the response has been good. I tried to spread the wealth. But when you have a sport that's so concentrated in one part of the country and in one conference, you're just naturally going to give more attention to that conference.
But before we get into kind of the finals this year, I got to ask, as someone who knows Vanderbilt and knows the psyche of Vanderbilt fans, I think Vanderbilt fans have internalized that they're shitty in football, that have internalized the basketball debacle here over the last 10 years. What does it mean for UT to be on their baseball corner, that they have built this pride around?
It's their turf.
And all of a sudden it's not just that it's another SEC team, it's fucking Tennessee. What does that mean for Vanderbilt fans?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for, like, you know, I know if you go on social media, it's obvious.
You can speak for all of them.
Well, I don't know. Like, I think the thing that would that they would say is, so it's okay to be into college baseball now, but it wasn't 10 years ago. Like, that was the message from Tennessee fan, like almost mocking Vanderbilt for caring about college baseball when Tennessee didn't make even the SEC tournament every year. But now that they're good, it matters. Like,
they liked it a lot in the early 2000s too when they were good. It's
right, right. So I mean, that's
weird how that works.
Yeah, I mean, there's levels of fans and crazy all this stuff. Like, I don't care. Whatever. Like, I root for Vanderbilt baseball. I mean, I cover it nationally, but I'm an alum. I go to the games. My son was a bat boy, but whatever. Like, objective when I cover it nationally, and I don't care. Like, it's the SEC's. It's great that the SEC is dominating, but you can't act like baseball didn't matter 5 years or 7 years ago, and now it's the most important sport in the world. I guess that would be. But again, I'm not speaking for. It's just different element out there on social media that can't handle the fact that Tennessee's good and, like, whatever. Like, to me, the more story is like, how were they so bad for so many years? Like, Dave Serrano, you know this, Braden, but they hired Dave Serrano. That was like, they hired a coach who'd been to College World Series, had been part of national championship programs, and they still were bad for like 5 years. So, but clearly they have Tony Vitello's unlocked. And a lot there.
And I honestly, like, I truly think it is, and again, being objective, I think it is great that Tim Corbin and Tony Vitello, and I said this a couple of years ago when they had that big series and, Vanderbilt won and knocked off Tennessee, and, like, Kumar Rocker's pitching, and he's got his dad coaching on the football staff. And, like, I think it is great for the game and for the state of Tennessee for there to be two healthy programs that are battling each other, but also two programs that are very authentic through their coaches to sort of the brands of their school. You got sort of the blue collar rednecks in Knoxville, and you got sort of the I've been to the classy party, and I'm Tim Corbin, and we've been here before, and we act like we've been there before.
Parties, by the way,
well, neither do I. Neither do I. But I think it's actually very good. I think it's very fun as an objective observer to see two different schools doing something at a very high level that are rivals and doing it their own way. I think that's okay, and the fact that the fans get after each other is good. It's healthy and fun if you can just step back and, like, not let yourself get taken over by the nonsense on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, I like pride myself on staying, like, I don't follow any fans of basically any team on social media. So people will say, "Did you see this?" I was like, "No, I didn't see anything." Because if you don't, everyone complains about Twitter, and it is what it is. But, like, not just like college sports, politics, whatever. I have managed to do a pretty good job with my feed following that. I like. There's not a lot of stuff I see that I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe that, or like, I want to stay out of that battle. So, but yeah, it's healthy as long as it's healthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As long as people don't, like, with any kind of fandom.
You've curated your feed better than Elon has, is what it sounds like.
Yes, yeah. I probably, I don't know how that happened, but
what is Tony Vitello's legacy in general? I mean, obviously, like, what's the like? He authentically is himself. He celebrates the way he celebrates. He's sort of done everything to build the program on the back end. Is there anything that makes him special or unique from all the guys that have won all these championships at all these other schools in the SEC?
Well, he's unique because he's different. I mean, the definition of unique, he's different. He goes about, he's fiery. Like, one thing I appreciate about him is he is very self-aware. Like, he knows, like, he'll say, and it's not just like coach speak, whatever, he always says like his players are more composed than him. Like, it was just he yells at the umpires, he comes storming out like that, but like he knows who he is. And
getting a warning on the third pitch of a championship series, for example.
Yeah, it was funny. I was at a wedding in North Carolina this weekend, so I missed the entire Saturday night game, and I was driving back Sunday and I actually downloaded the app. I was listening to the Texas A&M feed. Their announcers, they were great. They're like homers, but they were good announcers too. Just they were all over Tony. Like, oh yeah, Tony, that wasn't a strike. We've got it right here. Whatever. They were all over him. But his personality is different than most college baseball coaches, but a lot of them are fiery. Here's interesting, like kind of a side note to that, Braden. One thing that interests me about college baseball, and I might pursue this as a feature. I don't know if there's an answer for it, but there have been more over the last 2 decades, more rags to riches stories in college baseball than any other sport. Programs coming out of absolutely nowhere. I have it written down somewhere, but Virginia, Vanderbilt, Louisville. There's a couple more like that, and then
does Indiana count at all?
No. I mean, teams that like got to either won a national championship or been to Omaha a bunch. And then Tennessee's the only one of that group. I've got it written down somewhere again, but Tennessee's the only one of that group that had a past tradition. Like Virginia wasn't good. Louisville, Vanderbilt really had no tradition. I don't know. One of my theories is that there haven't been as many college baseball programs at the top of the sport. So there's more opportunity for upward mobility. Whereas in football, you've got more programs near the top that you can't say so-and-so came out of nowhere because they were good. Like Ole Miss, has been good in its past. I'm kind of rambling, but I don't know what the theory in my question.
It costs a lot less money too to build a program.
Well, in a sport where, and I don't want to insult baseball coaches, but where the actual coaching matters the least. Like you can come out of nowhere in football because you run a crazy offense that takes 2 years for college football to catch up to. Baseball, sure, coaching matters, being a good hitting coach, pitching coach, but for the most part, it's more about roster accumulation. I do think you hit on something there, like in the 2000s with Vanderbilt and Louisville, it didn't cost as much money to make a big, Vanderbilt, probably as of today, it's not the case. We don't know what Schlossnagle is going to be making, but Tim Corbin has been the highest paid college baseball coach for probably 10 years. And he probably is, again, not anymore, but being the highest paid college baseball coach isn't as big of a financial commitment as having the highest paid college football coach, where it's like 6-7 million. So we are, years ago, like 5, 10, 12 years ago. Yeah. So I just always find that interesting because, again, like Louisville, like just go back and look at Louisville's baseball history. Didn't exist before Dan McConnell. Brian O'Connor, Virginia was nothing. So just interesting to me.
How much of that is like on the recruiting side of things? There's so many knowns in football. I mean, because it is so watched. But on the baseball and the same thing about basketball and like between between high school and kind of like summer leagues and AAU and all this other stuff, like all these are knowns. But baseball is the least kind of scouted of those. I mean, like who the top prospects are, but it's hard to the recruiting world around that is just not as much. So it seems like there's more opportunity kind of for leverage within schools.
Yeah. So I would say the scouting is as intense as in other sports. It's just not out there. There's no like rivals top. Like Perfect Game these coaches don't, I'm not trying to be a wise ass here, but like, don't tell the baseball coaches who sit out in the 100-degree heat for 2 straight months watching high school, summer league baseball, a dude who might get 2 at bats and walk twice. You're like, I've been here for 3 hours and so it says, but there are more unknowns because there are more unknowns because, again, for what I just said, you might not actually get to see him perform because he walks, and it's just baseball's a high variance sport and there's more players. One thing about baseball that affects a team is the nature of the draft is you lose your very best players to the draft. And that's one thing, not to make Tim Corbin doesn't need me to make excuses for him, but I'm not talking about the guys who've gone in the top 10. Like every program's going to lose those guys. They've had a run. A couple years ago, they really got hurt in the draft. Like there was 2 or 3 big time, they thought hitters that were expected to get to campus who really blossomed in their spring of their senior year, ended up getting drafted first or second round they didn't get. So that's kind of like bad luck, where in other years you might get those guys to campus. And then we all know, if you follow this year, Vanderbilt's problem was lack of power. You get one or two of those bats in the lineup, maybe it makes a difference. One thing that NIL is doing across the board is helping to get those fringe prospects to campus, where you're not going to get the guy who's a top 15 draft pick. You just, the money, you can't, that's life-changing money. But the guy who might be a second round pick, where in years past would sign, now more of those guys are getting to campus. That's why we're seeing more overall talent in college baseball. So Steve, you do make a good point about the recruiting. I think it's more to do with losing guys to the MLB draft than it is about, not being enough scouting.
What's the marginal difference in money between, say, a third rounder, a fourth rounder, and NIL money?
I don't want to speak to that because I don't know. Like, I've come on, and I know you guys have had Ari Wasserman on the show. I'm reluctant to throw out numbers because what you hear from agents isn't, I've heard coaches say college baseball NIL isn't nearly what fans think it is. What they're doing now, Steve, is making everyone whole, so to speak, where I don't know every SEC team. I guess most SEC teams, the guys are now on quote unquote full scholarship. So if you're at Tennessee and tuition's, I don't know, $30,000, and you have in the years past you had $18,000 worth of scholarship, now you're not paying anything. That's what Vanderbilt's been able to do with the guys who, even with the financial aid, we're still paying stuff. Now they're not paying anything. So like, I don't know that to be a fact, but that's kind of the word on the street, that all these SEC teams are making everyone whole. Sure, some guys are the big transfers. Braden Montgomery from Stanford to Texas A&M. I'm sure, he's about to get paid big time in the draft. I'm sure he got a lot of money. I don't know how much money. Some coaches will say it's not nearly what you think, so I'm kind of reluctant to throw anything out.
Well, there. And like the 1, 2, and 4 hole hitters for Texas A&M all immediately went into the portal, like as soon as Jim Schlossnagle decided to leave. I'm assuming Jason, and why am I drawing a blank on Jason, the 2 hole hitter, the 6'6" guy, right fielder? Jason Laviolette. I'm assuming he's gonna make some money in the portal.
And also he could also, those guys could return. It's in their best interest to go into the portal now, because you can go back. I forget, because the portal's going to close in like a week or two, so you can always go back. But it's in their best interest to go, and then if they like the coach, they come back.
So I've got another feature idea for you here, because it's off of the Jim Schlossnagle situation. Look, it's a must-lie situation. Right? If your team is playing in the championship series and you think you're gonna take a job, or have had conversations about a job, it's a must-lie situation. Nick Saban famously, I will not be the head coach at University of Alabama. Like, there's must-lie situations, but now, because players have the freedom to move in all sports, coaches, I think at some point we sort of all just understand that this is business now, right? This is how people decide to do things. But attacking and berating a reporter for doing his job is not necessarily the best way to go about doing it. I covered Jim Schlossnagle at TCU at the World Series. It seems wildly out of character for him to do what he did. I know the emotions were high. So first of all, your reaction to Schlossnagle's handling of the situation, how could he have done that better? And then the decision to, of course, leave a program where at A&M, we look at that program and we say, what is it that this program is missing? There's nothing that they're missing from a support standpoint.
Yeah, I always say this, before your time, Braden, but Steve, remember when Eddie Fogler was the coach at Vanderbilt?
Oh, yeah.
So I was in college.
Yeah.
Same 4 years. I covered, I was sports editor of the Vanderbilt Hustler. He had and maybe it was a Dean Smith in North Carolina thing. He would say, anytime anyone would ask him, from the day he got there, I'm the head coach at Vanderbilt. I'll talk about Vanderbilt. I will not talk about another job. Like, I think after my sophomore year at Villanova, that back then there's no Twitter. I have no idea if he was on the short list.
People made a run like almost every year at him.
Yeah. So like he would just say, so like if you say that, if you make that and he's the best coach I've ever seen do that. If you start with that from your first year, you're not being hypocritical. Like if Schloss had been saying that all along, like if he says that the other day, I'm the head coach of Texas A&M, that's all I'll talk about. That's fine. It works. But then what if someone says, are you interested in the Texas job? I don't want to contradict. So my point is, you need to start that from the beginning. That needs to be your MO. Anytime anyone asks you about a job, on the record, you say, I'm the coach of Texas A&M. So then when you say it in that key moment, you don't sound hypocritical. You're not dodging the question. You're just staying true to who you are. So that's how I would, if I were in media relations, I would I would, and if a reporter tried to get me and be like, "Are you going to go to Texas?" I will not talk about Texas. I will talk about so and so. Yeah, obviously the emotions got to him. I watched his press conference yesterday. He apologized. He said that the whatever, he just 30 minutes earlier just lost the national championship game. I've interviewed him. Seems like a nice guy. I can't say whether it's out of character for him. How well do we really know these coaches? And to answer your question, like, I was on a radio show the other day. And by the way, another fun product of doing these weekly roundups. I've done a lot more college baseball radio stuff, which I absolutely love doing. Someone asked me, and I was like, because the timing of Texas was like, oh, they're going to go after Tony Vitello and Schlossnagle. And I was being naive, I guess. I'd be shocked if either one of those guys go. But maybe I didn't.
Oh, Tennessee fans are in their own feelings about Missouri right now, which is Vitello's alma mater. And I'm like, but rationally, it's like, what does Missouri have that Tennessee doesn't have? Like, why can you Texas? I can see Texas being maybe considered the premier job outside of maybe LSU in college baseball.
I think I believe Schlossnagle when he says this. Now, there's some backstory. He lost his athletic director, obviously, Ross Bjork going to Ohio State, and Trev Alberts coming in. There's some stuff about the stadium that I honestly think, and call me naive, that he's just – Chris Del Conte is one of his best friends in the world. He worked for him at TCU. He's now at Texas. And he phrased it this way. He goes, it's not that I didn't trust anyone at A&M. I know I can trust Chris Del Conte. Yeah. So it's like I have an opportunity to go work for my best friend. That being said, it's still kind of a dick move. Texas A&M is like you said, it's an unbelievable job. Like he's been a College World Series 2 times, 3 years. Fan support, check. New stadium, probably they don't even need, but new stadium, check. Yeah. NIL support, university support, but hey, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes with the athletic director. There could be things we don't know, but it's college baseball, so there's like maybe a ceiling to how much national coverage it gets. But to me, it's one of the juicier college sports stories in a decade.
Okay, so here's the feature idea, and you just titled it "Kind of a Dick Move."
Yes.
Is the title of the feature, because I would love to see a rundown of like the most blatant lies told by coaches immediately before taking jobs. And I think you could find because again, I don't actually hold it against them for doing what they think is best for their careers. Like, again, kind of a dick move for Schlossnagle to take the job, but you just laid out why someone would do it. And we can't tell another person in a capitalistic society what to do with their own family. Like, and now that players have the freedom to move around, I feel even less upset about coaches moving around. So I think if you go Nick Saban with the Miami thing, I don't know if Petrino's in there, but like you could do a really fun look at, here are like the 8 like bold-faced liars,
or just
kind of a move.
Or just call it famous last words.
Yeah. I mean, it is. Everyone knows that the question needs to be asked in the press conference, and again, it's just how you handle it. You can't threaten people. You can't be try not to be a jerk to it. There's some responsibility that comes with being the head coach at Texas A&M University. Not that this is like on the scale of things that Texas A&M fans are upset about or should be, like, you represent Texas A&M University in a press conference setting. You need to like kind of act with some class and stuff, and he did not do that. But again, who cares? One day later, Texas A&M, they will hire a good coach. We don't know who it's going to be. Texas is a premier job. I mean, David Pierce made 2 of the last 3 College World Series, and he gets fired. Now, again, there was a lot of turnover in his staff. There's always stuff that we don't know behind the scenes. So it's kind of, and I think Joe Healy from D1 Baseball wrote about this. It's like sort of a coming of age for the sport of college baseball that this happened. It's like, you might not like it. It might feel kind of dirty, but hey, it shows that like maybe it's elbowing its way in with the big 2, or there's big 1. It's like there's the big 1 of college football, then there's college basketball, and you got college baseball. And now
sort of like the comment section at The Athletic.
Exactly.
It's an indication. It's an indication that you've
tell
arrived.
me I suck, and then I'll know I made it as a college sports writer.
All right. So
is there any end to SEC hegemony here? I mean, realistically, we're looking at the SEC dominating college baseball for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, there's one thing that's not, and I think all coaches would agree. There's one thing that the charm of college baseball, part of it, in my opinion, was you had programs like Coastal Carolina. You've got programs like Campbell, like Louisiana.
Holy Cross,
like half
Fresno
of the
State.
half of the nation is kind of not eliminated, but it's more difficult for Big Ten teams and Northeastern teams because of weather. Now, St. John's has a good program. UConn has been to 6 straight regionals. You can win at schools like that. But I loved how Campbell, look at their draft history. You know, East Carolina. I worry that those programs are becoming more obsolete because of the portal now. Like those coaches who found those gems those guys are leaving after 1 year, 2 years to join the SEC.
Yeah, they're going to do to them in baseball what, you know, mid-major basketball has been happening for the last 5 years. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I interviewed for that story I told you earlier. I interviewed the Sam Houston State coach. They have a first-round draft pick, Walker Janik, a catcher who's like I said, going to be a first-round pick. And he's like, finding him wasn't the big coup for us. Keeping him for 3 years was the big coup for us. You know, the kid stayed there. So I think that's an unfortunate byproduct. But to specifically answer your question, like I make this point to people who are kind of just new to college baseball or don't quite understand it. Like, with all due respect to Missouri, who's hired a new coach last year, but their facilities are down, and they actually have a pretty proud tradition in the Big 12. You know, they were a good program before they came over. There are now, with Oklahoma and Texas, there are probably 15 of 16 fan bases where their fans expect them to go to Omaha 1 out of every 3 years or go to super regionals. That's not the case in football. That's not the case in any sport, in any other league. Okay, softball, I think all 13 teams made the postseason for the SEC, but you have, and now, you know, Kentucky obviously doing what they did this year. Their fans are on board now. Every fan base expects them. And like, I was trying not to be an SEC homer at all, but those 5, 13 and 17 teams that were on the bubble, those were all among the best teams, the top 25 teams in the country. Like, people complained about it. And it's only going to get worse with Oklahoma and Texas coming on because, you know, we know what Texas will be, and Oklahoma was in the championship series 2 years ago. So, Steve, to answer your question, no, it's not slowing down.
When you look at the along those lines, because like my first thought is like the Friday night starter at those small schools, like you can find that guy and you could keep that guy, and that's the guy that could win you a regional or a super regional, because you could throw him twice and that would get you through. And you know, I know there's a very famous Vanderbilt series with an Austin P pitcher that like was just one of the greatest pitched baseball games I've ever seen in my life here in Nashville. I'm curious about the Power Four. So we've got all these, you know, you got the new ruling from the House antitrust case where they're going to back pay about $2.8 billion. The Power Four commissioners are meeting with the NCAA privately now. The rest of the conferences don't even know that that's happening, and they're meeting to decide things like rules, money, and access to championships, which further is going to separate everything in college athletics. That's a football-driven decision. My question to you is, and you can speak to any sport if you want to go basketball here as well, but baseball is what we're talking about. How do you think the Power Four football line in the sand continued breakaway from a financial and governance standpoint, how does that actually trickle down to products like college baseball, college basketball?
Yeah, we have really smart people on staff that cover this, and I have kind of not managed to stay out of it. I follow it, but I don't know the details. The one thing I'll say about baseball, though, is you hear how they're going to remove the 11.7 cap of scholarships, and it will be either fully funded or schools can up to 25, whatever the number is. I think there's
so there could be a positive.
Yeah, but again, you do not have to do that. You are allowed to do that. Every SEC schools will do that. Some schools will do that, and most ACC schools will do that. But what about Big Ten schools? Like, what about, like, not that Minnesota has a trap. They haven't been good lately. They have new coaching change, but like, is Minnesota going to fund 30 baseball scholarships? Yeah. So I think that in definitely the smaller schools can't afford to do that. I don't think so. It's going to exacerbate what we've already seen. Like, I think college baseball is at its best spot it's been, but it's not great that all the teams are in the Southeast. Like, you know, I know the Pac-12's dissolved, but like, it's good when UCLA is good. It's good when Stanford and Oregon State are good. And you know, maybe there's a Michigan that sneaks in. It's not the healthiest, in my opinion, for the national coverage, for the national sport, when it's so concentrated in one spot.
Does the Pac-10 Pac-12 dissolution there is a great point too, and not necessarily because of those schools. I mean, those schools are going on to play for the most part in big conferences, but I wonder about like the next level down, like the teams that used to be powerhouses like Fullerton or some of the other kind of like smaller state programs.
Everything with UC in the front of it. Everything with UC.
Yeah.
Well, I have a good anecdote about that, Steve. I was at a Vanderbilt Kentucky game 2 years ago, and some guy sitting next to me who usually didn't sit in that section started talking to him, and then I could tell like he knew what he was talking about, like knew his baseball. And then some Vanderbilt staffer, like a recruiting coordinator dude, came over, started talking to him, and I kind of figured like, oh, this guy must be someone. So I started. When the guy left, I said, "Oh, is your son a recruit?" He's like, "Yeah, he's committed. For the class of baseball, Braden, class of 47. He's probably 2 years old. And he was committed, but he was from Southern California." And I started talking to him, and he's just like, "All these kids want to play in the SEC." Wow. UCA, actually, this is kind of USC now is going to get a new stadium, but it's like we've been hearing about USC's new stadium for years. Nothing happens. Sure, UCLA is good, but they come to the SEC, they see the facilities, they see the fan support, they want to go there. So like that's the point. So
they look one time into the stands.
Yeah, it's harder for the UCLAs of the world who have been good to recruit those kids. It trickles down. It's harder for Fullerton. It's hard. Now, Irvine was really good this year. Irvine had a good team.
Yeah.
It's possible. Arizona was really good this year. They were a top 16. They lost but whatever. Like, so it's I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's more difficult because the SEC monster, we're seeing all these Southern California quarterbacks lately commit to Big Ten and SEC schools. Kids want to play in the bigger conferences. Kids want to play in the SEC for baseball, whether from Southern California or whether from Georgia.
All right, we'll end on this note. Attendance, they set the record for attendance, I believe, this year at the new stadium. They set the record for home runs at the new stadium. Some of that is, I don't know if that's just they got lucky with the wind or they got some teams that were big power teams like a Tennessee where everyone looks like a middle linebacker where they're all like 6'1", 220. Obviously, it says to $2.82 million or 2.82 million viewers across the College World Series final. And I believe it was the second game 3, the championship on Monday night was the second most watched game on ESPN for college baseball. You talked about the draft and sort of the talent, Major League Baseball limiting the number of teams, and the draft has helped keep talent in college baseball. The NIL money is going to help keep college talent. Like, is this trend going to keep going? Is length of games a concern? Like, what is the next step for the actual event itself in Omaha?
I mean, it just keeps growing, and I think as kids see these college baseball teams and players on more of a national stage and celebrated more, they're going to want to be a part of that more. Again, like I said earlier, you're not going to turn, if you're a top 10 pick, as much as you love the school you signed with, it's not financially responsible to basically to turn that money down. But I think, the draft only being 20 rounds helps, which is more kids are getting to campus. The ability to, I'm just kind of thinking this through now. I don't know if this really plays into kids' minds, but the ability to transfer without sitting out, it lessens the like, oh no, I signed with Vanderbilt, I signed with Arkansas or Tennessee, and maybe I can't get on the field, so it's going to hurt my draft stock. What am I going to do? I don't want to sit out a year and transfer. Well, now if you go to Tennessee and as a freshman you're not quite good enough, okay, transfer somewhere else and be a Saturday starter there and show how good you are. See what I'm saying? Like, there's more, the freedom of movement allows you to showcase your skills more, where if you go to college and you're not stuck behind someone. Again, I doubt kids think that way, but that is an option. So yeah, I think the sport just continues to grow. I think we talked about this before we started. I think they did. I think they didn't necessarily do this for TV viewership, but it's been a byproduct. About 4 years ago, they switched the format. It used to always be they had those Friday games, the Friday and Saturday were the if necessary games, and then the championship series started on Monday night. They went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they realized that it's just it was just too long. It was just like, here's what you need to do. Talk to the like media relations people at school. I remember people I knew at Vanderbilt, they were there literally for like 3 weeks because the tournament's, 2 weeks, or they were there for 2.5 weeks. So they did it to shorten the time frame. But what they've done is you've changed your championship series from a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night on ESPN to a Saturday prime time ESPN, Sunday ABC, Monday night, if necessary, Game 3 championship. And the ratings are just going to be higher with that format than a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's hurt a little bit because in the previous format, it helped you like with your pitching. You had a little more rest, but it's still a long enough event. The event's still long enough. So I think that was a really smart move that they made. And real quick, time of games, I think the pitch in the regular season, it's fine. The pitch clock has done a great job with that. I go to games. I've gone to some 2 hours and 20-minute games this year where like, you're like, what the hell? Like I told my wife I wasn't going to be home until 5. It's 3:20. What do I do now? But
go to an 8th and Roast location in Nashville and hang out at the coffee shop, which I have seen you at, buddy.
Yes. Yeah. Steve, Braden and I were going to meet for coffee about 3 months ago. We get in there. I'm there early. He comes in, goes and sits and talks to someone else for 15 minutes. I'm like, I thought we were here to hang out.
It wasn't time for our meeting. It wasn't time for our meeting.
Par for the course.
Par for the course.
Yeah. So time game. Yeah. If you're watching a national championship game and it's 4 hours, who cares? To me, it's not a problem. Regular season games are fine. Yeah. And I just as one other anecdote, maybe it's because I'm more invested this year because I covered it more. I mean, I watched more of the regional weekend than I've ever watched. Like, I just thought that the sport, there were so many more compelling storylines. And then I'll stop rambling in 1 second. I think what we were fortunate this year is we just had a star-studded field in Omaha. Like, I as long as I've been following college baseball, this is the first time where you say you can make a legitimate argument for all 8 teams to win it. Like, there were 8 championship caliber teams in Omaha, where in years past you'd have an Oral Roberts great story, or you'd have a 2 or 3 like. Florida was the Cinderella team as the number 3 seed, and they're one of the most, they're one of
the best hitters in the game. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
go ahead, Steve.
Wait, Mitch, before you get out of here, I got to ask you this. So, with the integration of The Athletic kind of falling into the New York Times, is it kind of cool to see your stuff show up on the front page, the homepage of the New York Times? That's got to be kind of cool.
Yeah, we've had writers like write a story and then it gets in the print edition. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it is. Like we have meetings twice a year. We have an editors meeting in December, and then we have what we call our college sports summit in the spring. And we literally last week or 2 weeks, it was last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever. We're there at the New York Times now. Like, so our meetings, like, so I've got like my little New York Times badge and going to the building and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's been great. I mean, it's been great for The Athletic. I know, like, again, they're not putting my college baseball weekly roundup like on the New York Times sports page. Why?
Right next to the Gaza coverage.
Yeah. I've had a lot of my writers have stories on the front page of the first page of the sports section, and that's like really cool. Stories I helped edit, maybe an idea I came up with. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I'm waiting to see it above the fold, front page New York Times in print. Kind of a dick move. It's still what I'm waiting for.
Okay, I'll give you credit.
I want to see it. That's right. Coastal Elite, Mitch Light. Thank you for joining us, man, on the show.
Coastal Elite. I live in. Well, I guess I'm coastal. I live in Bellevue, so it's like the west coast of Nashville.
No,
so,
the complete opposite of that. Although New York in your blood, big guy. New York in your blood.
I grew up in New Jersey, so
there you go.
But hey, all right, my people are all from the South. My dad's from Alabama, my mom's from New Orleans.
True.
So
that's true. At Mitch Light on Twitter, of course, and The Athletic for all your you got everything, man. You're covering college football recruiting. You're covering college baseball now as well. So make sure you sign up at The Athletic, of course, for good college athletics coverage. And, of course, plenty of SEC homerism and SEC bias. That's what we appreciate about you, Mitch. Mitch, thank you so much for hanging out. We do appreciate it, man. Everybody go to 8th and Roast, of course, as well. Wonderful place here in Nashville to go get a good cup of coffee, great beans, and a good breakfast sandwich. Mitch, thank you so much for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
Always enjoy it.